Ladies and gentlemen, the Ukrainian Chorus Dumka of New York.
Talked several times during this interview about the world seeing the difference between good and evil. I want to bring that closer to home and talk about something that Congresswoman Liz Cheney tweeted yesterday about sitting Republican House members appearing at a white nationalist gathering. She said, quote, as Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene and Paul Gosar speak at this white supremacist, anti-Semitic, pro-Putin event, silence by Republican Party leaders is deafening and enabling. All Americans should renounce this garbage and reject the Putin wing of the GOP now. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Liz Cheney was right with that statement, and she's been right for a long time. And I also saw that Ronna McDaniel came out with a statement as well, talking about how repugnant these white nationalists are. Look, there's no place in either political party for this white nationalism or racism. It's simply wrong. It's as you've indicated, speaking of evil, it's evil as well. And you know, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Paul Gosar, I don't know them, but I'm reminded of that old line from the Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid movie where one character says, morons, I've got morons on my team. And I have to think anybody that would sit down with white nationalists and speak at their conference was certainly missing a few IQ points.
And just more broadly, the pro-Putin sentiment that you are seeing from some corners of your party.
Well, a lot of those people are changing their stripes as they're seeing the response of the world and the political response here in the U.S. But how anybody in this country, which loves freedom, can side with Vladimir Putin, which is an oppressor, a dictator. He kills people. He imprisons his political opponents. He has been an adversary of America at every chance he's had. It's unthinkable to be. It's almost treasonous, and it just makes me ill to see some of these people do that. But of course they do it because they think it's shock value and it's going to get them more eyeballs and maybe make a little more money for them or their network. It's disgusting, and I'm hopeful that you're seeing some of those people recognize just how wrong they were.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nicholas Lamar Soutter. Welcome to Overtime. Democracy dies in darkness. That was added to the masthead of the Washington Post, I believe in 79. And I think about why we do this show, and this show is immensely difficult, takes a lot of time, and there's so many people who contribute, without which we really genuinely wouldn't have been able to continue. But the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States is the First Amendment because information is vital to any decision-making process, and I look at the bravery of the Ukrainian people. And I realize that whatever sacrifices I've put into at least trying to educate people as to what's going on, it pales in comparison to what those men and women are doing. So I'm, as I've said before, and I'm certainly say again, privileged to be able to do the absolute minimum I can, which is to try to get out a show that's as accurate as possible and informs as many people as possible. It's not going to be an easy show tonight, and I have a suspicion they're going to get harder in the short term. This is because, as impartial as we try to be and say, look, there's mounting evidence that Putin is targeting civilians, I think at this point it's not really a claim we can easily say is mounting evidence. It seems pretty clear he's targeting civilians, and in the worst possible way. There have been many claims of war crimes. We have some of them on video. So, we've covered some wars in the past. This isn't new for anyone on In Time, but usually, at least, there was ostensibly a good reason for them. Even the ones that had bad reasons, at least there was a reason. This one isn't like that, and unfortunately, the only thing that we have to report right now is that things have been getting worse and are in the immediate term going to most likely continue to do so. So, that having been said, Ukrainian Russian officials met today at the border for a peace summit. This is the border of Belarus and Ukraine. During this time, while Vladimir Putin was on the phone with the French president, saying that he really believed that during the peace talks, the attacks should de-escalate and there should be sort of a cooling off period. Instead, the reverse has been happening. New airstrikes were reported in Kharkiv during those talks, and after the first round of talks, roughly 6 hours, ended, they left agreeing only to meet again in the coming days. At least 9 people have been killed and 37 more injured after Russian forces launched multiple rocket strikes into the eastern Ukrainian city of Kharkiv in what appears to be a deliberate attempt to target civilians. Quote, "Today we had a difficult day. It showed us that this is not just a war, it is a massacre of Ukrainian people," said the city's mayor, Ihor Terekov. Quote, "The missiles hit residential buildings, killing and injuring peaceful civilians. Kharkiv has not seen such damage for a very long time. This is horrible. At least 3 children and 2 adults were killed when their car caught on fire from the shelling and they were unable to escape. 4 more people were killed when they were forced out of their shelter to find water." Video shows dozens of Grad missiles raining down on the center of Ukraine's second biggest city, landing mostly amongst residential buildings. One resident described the attack as, quote, "horrendous," and the worst yet, following 5 days of what has been described as remorseless bombardment of the invasion. Ukraine's former defense minister, Andrei Zagorinsky, said Russia was now using multiple rocket launcher systems to target civilian infrastructure and civilians themselves. The Grad attacks were taking place also in Kiev and Mariupol, he said, amid Kremlin frustration that the military breakthrough has not yet been achieved. We will show some footage of that. Human rights groups and Ukraine's ambassador told the U.S. today that cluster bombs and vacuum bombs have been used. We've discussed this yesterday. The evidence is mounting that there was at least a single attack of this nature. Those are essentially war crimes to use these weapons, and you can't really hide the use of them, which means Putin really does not care at this point that people are aware that he is committing war crimes. As we speak, a very large column, the longest to date, the biggest to date, has been seen heading towards Kiev. Initially, it was reported to be 17 miles long. I believe this is conflating the previous column from yesterday with today's column. This is a picture of the column right here. And we're going to show you another picture right here. That is a 40-mile long column. That is not 17 miles. That is 40 miles long, headed straight to Kiev. We're going to discuss what we believe the intentions are at this point, and we're going to delve a bit more into the map as we have it, but it is unfortunately looking extraordinarily bad. Roughly, so at this point, I'll get into it. Roughly 400 mercenaries from the Wagner Group, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, a private mercenary firm with close ties to Putin, have now been confirmed to have been operating in Kiev. It is unclear what their goals were. The Ukrainian government is saying that their goal is to assassinate the president and that they've been there for some time and to, quote, decapitate the head of government. That's the Ukrainian government claim, and they say that they're getting this from their own intelligence agencies. The UK Independent says that more likely this unit, which is not really suited for, it's capable of, but not suited for assassinating leaders, not an assassination company. And Putin has access to military units perfectly willing and capable of doing that. They believe that actually this is essentially a counterinsurgency unit and had been deployed ahead of time on the grounds that they knew they'd be facing an insurgency and wanted to be prepared for that. That suggests, too, that they had been preparing for months in advance on the assumption that this was going to happen. We also believe now at this point that in Kharkiv, multiple apartments had been rented and staffed with Russian counterinsurgency units and saboteur units that had started operations at least a month before the invasion, strongly suggesting that Putin had, if not already made up his mind, was at least preparing well in advance for this. The group has already itself received multiple rounds of sanctions for alleged human rights abuses and violations in the Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. The United States today expelled at least 12 Russian diplomats, claiming that they were engaged in activities, quote, not in accordance with their obligations and responsibilities as diplomats. I may forget some of the key points that I'd like to discuss today. This is one of them, so if I forget, don't hesitate to remind me. The International Olympic Committee's executive board said today that they recommended banning Russia and Belarus from the Olympics indefinitely, and FIFA and UEFA have also banned all Russian football teams until further notice. The Moscow Stock Exchange did not open today, and have said now that they are actually going to remain closed until at least March 5th. The Russian ruble hit a new record low at its worst. It was down about 40% against the dollar. The Russian economy continues to take a significant hits, while the Bank of China's Singapore operations has declared that it would no longer finance Russian oil trades. This marks the first time that any element of China has actually weighed in on this, other than to say, well, we see the perspective of both sides, which is exactly what they've been saying. See yesterday's show for that one. Meanwhile, Russia's economy is receiving basically a body blow. This was not anticipated for a number of reasons. We had discussed this earlier. We thought the sanctions would have probably only about 20% efficacy, but this was based on the grounds that the sanctions were going to stop at a very specific point, and that is where it starts to really do damage to the U.S. economy. This includes the SWIFT banking network, which we had believed the U.S. would not be willing to pull the trigger on removing Russia from that. That's actually a great benefit to the U.S. We'll talk about why, even under sanctions, that helps the U.S. having Russia on there. Nonetheless, at first, U.S. appeared to say they wouldn't do it, and they've now pulled the trigger on that. Between that and a number of other sanctions, Russia is not insulated well enough to withstand this. And unfortunately, and this is something we discussed last night, and Macmillan pointed out, there is another set of victims here that we are not considering and often do not consider, and that's the Russian people who did not elect Putin in any meaningful sense. They did not elect him. He's won their elections, but they were not fair elections. They were not free elections, and anybody who opposes him usually ends up dead. So they are victims too, as they are becoming increasingly aware of almost an economic apocalypse at this point facing them, which, considering what they've been through already, is quite staggering. We will get into that in a minute. We're going to talk tonight a bit about the Russian economy. I think that was sort of the goal was tonight was to talk primarily about that, but I don't think we can at this point. There's just too much else going on, and we do believe at this point that column is going to engage in some meaningful way in the next 12 hours. So far, it hasn't been a tremendous escalation that we had anticipated, and we talked about last night and the night prior. Our hope was that this was a good sign that Putin was starting to genuinely reconsider. At this point, we believe actually no, it's basically been pulling back on the rubber band. He's been amassing troops. He's going to do one of two things at this point: either completely encircle Kiev and try to starve it out, or an all-out assault on Kiev now with the combined forces of both the columns. I think there's no way to guess which, but either one is kind of a nightmare scenario. So Putin has, as we've discussed before, largely sanction-proofed his economy. This was done by minimizing Russia's reliance on imports and exports. Now, exports are actually critically important to a modern economy. It's a great way to bring money in and raise your GDP. Imports also help dramatically. Free trade in general is almost as close to an absolute good as you can get in economics as I've ever seen. It's actually it's one of the few not zero-sum games. It's a net plus gain, because you're taking something that you have an excess of that you don't need and trading it for something you have a deficit of. Both sides end up coming away with something that they need in exchange for something that they really had too much of. So trade is one of the few systems that's an absolute good in that sense. And Russia has been basically trying to reduce its dependency on trade, and in terms of exports, relying on exports that are very difficult to sanction because it hurts everybody else when you sanction them. Energy, gas, oil, stuff like that. And they've been reasonably successful. And I think they thought that there'd be some consequences, obviously, maybe canceling the German pipeline, which was one of the first things to happen. But now talking about and genuinely watching everybody cut off the tap in every other meaningful sense, and watching the ability of Russia to generate any kind of revenue or sell anything completely evaporate. Now, this has done significant damage to the economies in Western countries, and they have, for the most part, unanimously thus far said, bring it on. And that's why it's been working. I think most people, even myself, did not anticipate. Putin certainly didn't, but it was at least as much as I'd hoped for and more than I had expected. And I think that's true of most people at this point. And proud that we're still willing to sacrifice at least some to help innocent people. So what is some of the problems facing the Russian economy, and why is it so serious? The ruble is what is called a soft currency. That is to say, it's unstable and unreliable. The dollar does move up and down. We all know that. But compared to it's a hard currency. Compared to soft currencies, it barely moves, actually. And so the dollar is the reserve currency of the world. If you have dollars, you can trade it for just about anything. It's a pretty ubiquitous currency. And so Russia, while saying that it's illegal to trade and use dollars, acknowledges that basically everybody does it. Well, they don't acknowledge it, but everybody does it. And the reason is because the ruble is too unstable. When the ruble is really, really bad, they just start using dollars. And it makes it a lot easier for them to withstand these kinds of blows. It's illegal because every time you do that, you're actually further undermining the Russian currency. The Russian currency can't become a hard currency if they can't stabilize their economy. And that becomes very hard to do if people are allowed to use any other currency. So it's kind of a lose-lose situation, but for the most part, in order to stave off a revolution, they look the other way when people use dollars. I was in Russia. I was one of the last people actually out of the Soviet Union, and nearly got shot by 16 people with AK-47s over a misunderstanding with the border guard. And this was funny. It was a bribery thing, it turns out, and I didn't realize that I was supposed to be bribing border guards. That came as news to me. I failed to bribe the border guard, and that nearly got me shot. Long story. We'll save it for another time. Having said that, when I was there, I remember the exchange rate was about 1 to 30. You could get 30 rubles for $1, but what was worth noting is that the costs were roughly the same. So anything that you could spend that would cost you $1 in the U.S. would cost you a ruble over there. Cars had the same price. It was just in rubles instead of dollars. Everything had roughly the same price. It was pretty easy to tell what the value of something was, because you could just, instead of having the ruble symbol, just use $1 and you were pretty good. Except that the exchange rate was 1 to 30. So if you came in with $300, that's what, $3,000 worth of spending money. And the reality is that was the official exchange rate. You could get, if you were careful, as high as 10 times that much on the black market, which, by the way, I thought the black market was people in, black hats and, trench coats sitting it's like, would you like to buy a... No, the black market was just a flea market down the street. Everybody knew where it was. Everybody went to it. I remember when we first went to it, I was like, we're not going to get arrested. They're like, no, everybody goes to the black market every day. It's, boom, you go down there. And I was accosted by people who recognized me as an American instantly and said, well, here's a Russian military watch, genuine Russian military watch, $10 American. I was just like, no, thank you. I don't need one of these. Well, but name your price. Just name your price. And I was just like, this has to be a joke. So just on a whim, I was just like, $1. I'd probably been willing to spend more, but on a whim, sure, $1. Said, sold, boom, done. And all of a sudden, I've got a Soviet watch. That's how badly they wanted the currency. It didn't matter. They'd be willing to pay 10 times the rate. So now in reality, for every dollar, you had almost $300 worth of buying power. We were in a bus, basically a Greyhound kind of bus. It broke down. And I calculated that if we each chipped in $10, we could buy a brand new one right off the lot. However, and this is one of the differences, the economy was so stifled in other areas, it would be an 11-year waiting list just to buy a car, let alone a bus. But it was an interesting new understanding of how economics works. All right. So, and believe it or not, all of that will be relevant in just a minute. So, because the ruble has always been so unstable, they prefer to use dollars, but they make it illegal because by using dollars, you're not helping prop up the value of the ruble. Well, at this point, the ruble is under assault, and Russia is doing everything it can to prop it up. But that means sacrificing the economy to keep it up. That's one reason they haven't been as strict as prior in keeping dollars out of the country. So, let's see. Right now, Russia has, it's always been illegal to use dollars or other currencies. These have still been highly sought after. And even the central bank, the Russian central bank, has had a reserve of dollar bills that they can rely on when the ruble falls too low. They can trade in dollars, hedging their losses. However, the sanctions have not only made that harder, but the revocation of the SWIFT network, which is nothing more than it's just a network of computers. They used to use telex, and actually Russia can still use telex if they want to, but it's now much more slower. It doesn't have verification, so they got to check, recheck, send multiple messages. It goes slower, but to the best of my understanding, they actually still could use telex. It's one step up from smoke signals, as we were talking about earlier. So they can do it, but the speed is going to be 1/100,000th of the actual. I mean, it's message by message. It's not 70,000 messages a second or whatever the SWIFT thing is capable of. At any rate, without the use of the SWIFT network, they can't trade in dollars, even in the cases where that is still legal. So their entire reserve of U.S. dollars is worthless. They do have a reserve of gold, and they are now apparently trying to buy a good deal more gold. Nobody wants to do business with them, which means a large portion of the reserve of the central bank is now worthless. It's got value, but they can't do anything with it. So until they are reintegrated back into the Western economy, there is absolutely nothing they can do with their reserves. So that we have basically wiped out, or I've got to be a little careful with this because we're talking economics, so I got to get this right if I can. We have frozen a vast amount of the Russian reserves from their central bank. So, let's see. I want to get in. So, The dollar is now even more valuable there than ever. And today, the average Russian citizen went down to the ATM and pulled as much money as possible out of their machines. Some places were ostensibly black market, I would assume, were selling dollars, but they ran out of dollars in some cases in minutes. People were so eager for it and willing to do what they usually are willing to do, which is pay even as high as 10 times the official trade rate, because the dollar will still have value a year from now. The ruble, who knows? So there was a report actually of a woman walking away from one of the banks after she found out that American dollars were no longer available, saying, "Well, what am I going to do? Use rubles?" So let's see. The the Central Reserve of Russia has announced that it will more than double its interest rate from 8% to 20%, and is forcing major export companies to sell at least 80% of their foreign currency reserves. Why? They're doing this because it's going to shore up the ruble. What they're trying to do is, since many of these companies can't trade anyway, they're saying you're going to sell off all of your foreign currency and trade only in rubles. This is utterly devastating to these companies, because if the ruble had value and you could trade in them effectively, they'd be using it. They use dollars because, again, it's the reserve currency of the world. This is going to have a dramatically, this is staggering and dramatic losses to the international companies in Russia who are required to do so. It's Putin's regime, whatever he says goes. It's also going to affect most of the energy sector, which most needs and relies on that foreign currency, and needs that foreign currency just to work. That is their strongest sector. Their strongest sector is now going to take the largest hit. With the ruble in free fall, people are looking for a way to protect their money. As I said, the central bank is trying to buy gold and is having limited results there. But people at this point, it looks like, are trying to purchase consumer goods, appliances, electronics, and the reason is simple, believe it or not, which is, they're going to take a hit selling them later. Once you buy it, it's now used, even if you never take it out of the box. So you're going to take at least a 30% hit in the value. That's still safer than keeping your money at the bank at this point. So there's a run on consumer goods as people try to use these actually as a hedge against what's happening to the economy. But this also means that now all of these businesses are running extremely low on supplies, and it's not a boon for them. You'd think they'd make a lot of money, but they can only be paid in rubles now, which is completely worthless, which means they're selling their products at the worst possible time, but they don't really have much of a choice because they need money as much as everybody else. This is an absolute catastrophe for every business, including consumer electronics, which is just getting a little bit less of a catastrophe than everybody else, and will soon be in the exact same boat as everybody. A million rubles isn't actually all that different than 50 rubles. So, meanwhile, an anonymous source, the owner of an advertising company with roughly 100 employees, told The Guardian that this was, quote, a crisis that we have never experienced before, like flying a plane with the engines on fire. Now, keep in mind, by the way, also when I was there, and there are many Russians alive for this, the line from McDonald's was 7 blocks long. I remember we were going to go to there actually is a Baskin Robbins Red Square, and we're like, wow, American, well, let's go do it. And we saw there 5 people in line. And so all the Americans said, there's a line, let's skip it. And the Russians nearly fell out of their seats laughing, like, that's not a line. And once you've seen lines that last a day just to get a loaf of bread in Russia, and those are now being thought of as the good old days. So, another anonymous businessman said, let's go back to the advertising company man. He said his clients included Pepsi and Volkswagen, but those brands are pulling out of the market and or banned from the market altogether. Another anonymous businessman has said that even if in the pandemic, there was at least a reason to keep fighting for your business. There was an assumption that maybe at the end you could still survive it. It would be leaner and a lot of your competitors would be gone, but if you were lucky and worked your ass off, you might make it. He said, however, that now, quote, I don't see a light at the end of the tunnel anymore. Even if peace is achieved, the damage is done. How do we reverse it? Again, these are people who didn't vote for Putin in most cases. It appears that there's no economic plan for dealing with these sanctions, no consensus. and a consensus that after the fall of communism, basically all of the progress that was done in integrating Russia into the West has been completely for naught. It's all been lost. At least that seems to be the consensus that this article, again in The Guardian, says is basically the tone of Russians today. So, and I mean, by the way, once again, in Russia, I remember I've already talked about the exchange rate and how and why the currency kind of worked the way it did. I remember as I was getting on the subway, I was reaching for change and I dropped 10 kopecks. Just a 10, essentially their equivalent of a 10-cent piece. Dropped it, it fell onto the floor and started to roll, and I was about to get it. And I realized I couldn't do anything with it. This was the day before we were going to leave. I couldn't put it back into American currency because it wasn't worth even a cent. It wasn't worth a cent. There was nothing I could do with it. It was literally had so little value. It wasn't worth the breath to bend over and pick it up. An amazing feeling. And I remember one of our Russian counterparts grabbed it and hurriedly went off and chased it because it was like rolling down into the subway. And she grabbed it and came back and said, here, here. And I was polite, said, oh, thank you so much. And I was just like, I honestly can't. And this was back then, and things are worse now. I do see there's a lot in the live chat. I'm going to actually get into it in just a few minutes because I assume there's some pretty good questions in there. Moving forward, I also want to discuss nuclear weapons for a little bit, a conversation that nobody wants to have. I've been getting a lot of... I've started to figure I can judge the efficacy of In Time by how many private DMs I get that are kind of under the radar from people saying, listen, can you tell me what's going on with the nuclear weapons? Putin did put his forces on high alert. What does that mean? Nobody friggin' knows. For all we know, it's just a declaration on paper. But there is an alert status. And nuclear weapons, it's fascinating to get into the how and the why, the psychology of how these things work. It's a little terrifying as well. We keep our missile silos on high alert at all times. Why? Well, because they can launch much faster that way. It has been decided that we could dramatically reduce the chances of an accidental launch if we were to remove the warheads and put the warheads on only if and when it looked like we might be needing them in the near future. But the problem is that dramatically reduces our response time, so we refuse to do it. I believe it was Bush, don't quote me on this, but I believe it was the first Bush who, in an effort to reduce the chances of nuclear war, did in fact order our bombers off of a state of high alert. We have had the war games scenario has happened. It's actually happened to both Russia and to the U.S. Russia at one point, in fact, as I understand it, did in fact during the Cuban Missile Crisis issue an order to actually, let's see. Yeah, here we go. I think I've got the information right here as it comes down to it, since we're going to be talking about what are the chances of nuclear war at this point, because everybody seems to be concerned about it. And the good news is I think the probability is low. I understand why people are concerned, and we're going to talk about it for a minute. But let's see. Former Intelligence Chief General James Clapper suggested that he believes that, in fact, the threshold for nuclear launch has been lowered in Russia. It was lowered roughly in 2014 by an official Kremlin document, which raised the probability that a limited first nuclear strike, very limited, could actually be effective in war, because if you were losing in a conventional war, you could actually deliver a very small first strike just in that theater, not against your opponent's country, and your opponent can't actually do anything, because if at that point they've lost there, they could retaliate, but that would be presumably worse than the initial attack, since they've already been defeated and now it's just sour grapes. Or they could attack your entire country and start World War III, and nobody wants to do that. So you actually could deploy tactical nuclear weapons in a limited way in a very small theater. This was an assessment that came out of the Kremlin in 2014 and appears to have been adopted as policy, that this was actually possible. The policy was called, believe it or not, escalate to de-escalate. The idea being that if you suddenly detonate a nuclear weapon, well, hey, nobody's going to fight anymore, so it's done. Or it was also the abbreviation E2 to de-escalate, to de-escalate. So while this has been a policy we believe in Russia for a while, enough that it was included in Trump's 2018 National Security Review, which presumably he ignored, that does increase the chances of a nuclear deployment in general by Russia at any time. But again, getting back to former intelligence chief General James Clapper, he believes that it's not likely to happen. He said, quote, "It would not help the Russian military achieve any of its goals at this point, and the political consequences would be orders of magnitude worse than what we are seeing now if Putin were to attempt this. However," one other thing before we get into the however. History has also pointed out that it's actually not necessarily that easy to get your military officers to deploy a nuclear weapon. The Soviet Union actually attempted a nuclear launch, 2 nuclear strikes that were halted at the 11th hour by individual officers of Vasily Arkamov during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Or sorry, by an individual officer. I think that was 1962. And Stalinov Petrov, after a military computer falsely warned of a U.S. strike in 1983. This is the War Games scenario. Maudi has not seen War Games, if I recall. We have yet to have our enforced viewing of War Games. War Games was based on an actual event. It wasn't a computer hacker that accidentally hacked into NORAD. But in fact, training tapes were left on in NORAD and notified the entire U.S. from CENTCOM all the way through NORAD that there had been a Soviet missile launch against the U.S. It got all the way to the White House Chief of Staff, who was ordered to wake the president and tell him that he had 5 minutes to determine whether or not we were going to reply and wipe out the Russians before we all died. The Chief of Staff said, we're going to wait on this, and I want visual confirmation from any air base, at least radar confirmation, that there is a missile inbound. And he was told that this would probably make it too late to reply. He said he refused to even wake the president. No, actually, he had woken the president. I'm sorry, he had woken the president, and I believe they were already starting the process, but he refused to complete the process until it was confirmed by Andrews Air Force Base that there was, in fact, a missile incoming. Time came and went, missiles never landed. So that's how close we came. At any rate, yes, it has happened where we have had orders on both sides to deploy nuclear weapons and they've been disobeyed. So where do we stand right now? Well, Putin has increased ostensibly the alertness of his military in terms of nuclear deployments. We don't know what that means. Ostensibly, it just means it's easier to deploy them or to deploy them faster. We're already at high alert with our missiles and have been for a very long time. It's a destabilizing move. It's not productive. The general consensus is it actually doesn't mean much past that, and that he would not deploy it because he's not completely unhinged and he's aware that as bad as the retaliation from the rest of the world is towards him for what's happened, he's not going to deploy it. The other consensus is that he is now dramatically increasing the chances that he's going to be assassinated. None of the oligarchs want this. All of the oligarchs would rather live than die. And if he's talking about nuclear weapons, they're asking themselves at what point are they going to allow this to continue? And they are capable of killing him and interested in killing him. Okay, Maudi, you've seen it a zillion times. I'm aware you're older than me, Maudi. Believe me, it's one of the few things that makes it easier for me to sleep at night. I think it may have been Vox who hadn't seen it. I think you and I were ganging up on Vox and suggesting she was going to be forced to see it. So, but that was a while ago. So, at any rate, I cherish the idea that Maudi would be both older than me and completely ignorant of some cultural icon. But I guess I can't have my cake and eat it too on that front. So, dear Lord, okay, yeah, I'm going to be outclassed by the live chat on this one tonight. So, where do we stand on that? And it's been coming up on the Discord, and there was actually, I wanted to put this up. This was a Russian writer. I forget his CV, but he posted this. Now, this was mistaken for saying that he has been killed. He has not been killed. Nobody has. But the general consensus is at this point he has done tremendous and irrevocable damage to the Russian economy. He had not anticipated this. Again, nobody anticipated the countries putting forth this much effort into it. The war is going reasonably poorly. We believe is one reason he's escalating. We're about to discuss where they are, but they have yet to have accomplished a single one of their strategic goals. We believe they will be accomplishing one probably within the next 24 hours. We'll discuss what that is when we go to the map. But that will be their first strategic goal. We believe they had intended to do that in under 12 hours. It's been now almost a little more than 4 days, I think, and they have still yet to achieve it. But we think they will shortly, and I'll discuss that in a minute. At any rate, this is the kind of thing where Putin is you're going to get with any luck at this point, hate to say it, you're going to get a headline saying Putin died of natural causes, heart failure, and what they'll fail to put in print is his heart failed naturally after he was stabbed 12 times in the chest. That's a very real possibility. He knows that. So the question is, what's he going to do now? We've been discussing on this show repeatedly how to make him predictable, how to try to understand his mindset. And we're like, well, if he's still got this Cold War mindset, then it's going to be double down after double down after double down. If he, in fact, deployed the hyperbaric bomb, which we believe at this point he did, the evidence to that is really quite staggering. He has committed war crimes. We already believe he's committed war crimes. The stories coming out of, and video coming out of some of the smaller cities in which he is just obliterating. Once it became clear he couldn't take Ukraine, he's been trying to inflict maximum damage. The goal is to terrify the population to the point where they surrender, because it may be he actually cannot capture it. So he is now adding humiliation to the fact that he's got one of the largest militaries on the planet and they're getting nowhere. So would he order a tactical nuclear deployment under those sorts of circumstances, limited in that area? It is possible. I think the likelihood that he would do that is reasonably slim, and the likelihood that that order would be carried out before he was killed is even slimmer. It seems a little foreign to Americans, but Russians have a tradition of finding ways of dealing with that, and the oligarchs have absolutely no loyalty to him beyond what he can give them, and at this point, that amount is shrinking rapidly. We also do have this. This is the footage of the attack. This was an attack that we believe quite strongly was deliberate. It appeared not to be anti-aircraft, but an actual missile hitting an apartment complex, which, again, appears to have been deliberately targeted. One of the things that makes this so difficult is we've all seen war. We've been seeing war in Afghanistan, and I think sometimes we forget, because of any number of reasons, usually just massive cultural differences, that these are people, too, who love their children just as much as we do. But what makes this so difficult, aside from culturally, this is a bit closer to what I'm used to in my day-to-day life, the amount of people in that city is greater than anything we've seen since World War II. And this is a devastation on a scale unseen, certainly in Europe, and I think anywhere in the world since World War II, is what they are preparing to do at this point. So what is it they're preparing to do, and what do we know? I'm going to pull up the map here. And one of these days, I'll figure out that I should put the map on a closer monitor so I don't have to be looking over there just to move the map for you guys. Well, yeah, Gorbachev was kidnapped too, yeah, and the oligarchs aren't playing. The oligarchs aren't playing. He deliberately has around him, the most powerful people he has around him are all murderers and thugs. Why? Well, because he knows that with them on his side, he can do just about anything he wants, and they'll enforce his laws for him because they want him to stay in power. But they'll also kill him pretty quick if they have to. The column that we talked about is coming down towards Kyiv. This is the city of Kyiv right here. Right now, it appears that there isn't any significant combat in the area, but we have a column coming down through this area that they already control, and it is 40 miles long. That is about 2.5 times larger than anything we've seen so far. It's going to meet up with the previous column. We don't know what happened to the previous column. There's some evidence it got struck and hit reasonably hard, but at this point, we believe it's largely intact. Meanwhile, he has been aware that he has been unable to take that city and probably won't be able to take it anytime, or wasn't able to take it anytime soon, certainly not until that column gets there. He was hitting Kharkiv. This is Kharkiv. They are essentially surrounded at this point, not quite, but very close. let's see. You can see to the north, to the south. Oh, there it is. Oh, sorry. Nope, I was in the wrong spot. So north, somewhat to the east, little pockets here that are being used ostensibly for some kind of staging. This is a firing ground of some kind, and they've been shelling that area. And again, civilians coming out just to find supplies to survive are getting killed. You can see the force line right here starting to go over the shape of the city. For all intents and purposes, actually, at this point, you can't escape any way to the north. From the center of the city, if you go north, you're going to hit the Russians. You can maybe go east. You're going to hit the river. Probably no way to cross it. The Russians are going to hold that. You can go west, maybe get out, and maybe to the south. West, you're going to hit the river until you hit Kiev, which isn't any better. Well, Kiev right now is better, actually. They're not doing the same thing to Kiev. This again, at this point, we believe they are deliberately targeting civilians to break morale, and that they've decided that this is the only way they can win. Putin wants to be in power forever. He knows there's a limitation to this. He's mortal, but he would like to be the next czar. He would like to be remembered like Stalin and Lenin. And by the way, if you really do think you understand Russian mentality, keep in mind everybody knows how many people Stalin killed. It was a huge number. And he is absolutely responsible. And yet Lenin, who started the revolution and was one of their key figures and had a city named after him, the city of Leningrad, that city was changed not that long ago from Leningrad to Stalingrad. They don't view Stalin the same way we do. The Russian mindset takes a little more work to get into than just saying you. So, yeah, there's a decent possibility he's going to be assassinated, and that possibility grows every second, and he knows that. Now, he is still in his Cold War thinking. What does that mean? That means that what he sees is there has to be a military solution to this, and it's going to be to apply more force. Now, he is aware that he is at this point taking a very large risk, because if he applies more force, he may get the international community even more against him. But rather than sitting there saying, okay, I have miscalculated, and maybe some of my assumptions about what's going on around me are wrong, what he's saying is, okay, obviously, yeah, they do have more resolve than I thought, which just means I have to work harder. And if I work a bit harder and get a little more brutal, they will quit. That actually got the Russians reasonably far through the Cold War. That doesn't work here. And to tell you the truth, I was a little surprised that it wasn't going to work. And so far, it appears like it's not working. And at this point, the momentum is against him. The more he does, I think the worse sanctions are going to get. And I think at this point, most Americans and most of the rest of the world is willing to pay just about any cost. This has to be stopped. The last time we saw anything like this was in the late 1930s, and we all know exactly how that ended. So at this point, we believe, if we understand Putin's mindset, and that's a little hard to do because he's a sociopath, like I've said before, and I never hesitate to, he's killed people with his bare hands. This is the guy we're talking about. That it takes a special kind of, seriously. So we believe at this point what he's going to try to do is he's actually not as far from encircling Kiev as you may think. He can obviously strike in these areas. I think that's a civilian base. No, it's an air base. And it looks like they have control of this air base right now. Several air bases have been flipping control, but that road goes right through that air base. He can launch from that air base, presumably at just about any time he wants to. So you can't get out that way. River down to the south, they own this right here. You could probably get out of Kiev, but it is hard at this point. There are still people leaving. We believe at this point 500,000 civilians have fled Ukraine, but there's still a large number here in the city. You can't escape to the north, and so we believe he's going to do one of two things. He's either going to try to encircle the city and starve them out. The last time this was done en masse to what was a modern city was the city of Leningrad. It's often called the 900-day siege, and it's probably one of the most brutal sieges in human history. And that Russia, who suffered this, is now attempting to inflict it on Ukraine is breathtaking. Or he's going to engage in attack. If I had to guess, and this is wild speculation because I ain't the military guy, I think he's going to attack. He knows that he's limited in time, and every day, every hour that passes, he is in more serious and life-threatening danger, probably. So I don't think he's going to wait. I think he's going to attack. That's just also how he operates. So we've been saying before, we've been expecting major attacks. We expected one after that last column, and it didn't happen. But I think we're going to get it, and I think we're going to get it soon. So we're going to keep an eye on that. But that is then 2 columns that we anticipate, the largest of which is 40 miles long, hitting Kiev and hitting it pretty soon. I would imagine, just to make things more difficult for them, he's going to start again in earnest on Kharkiv. We also are aware he's very limited in supplies now. He had enough fuel and food for these people for a short period of time. They have been pillaging and stealing the food in any area that they can, so food may not be as big a problem. They're just going to take it from the civilians. Fuel is a problem, and so is ammunition, and they aren't actually prepared to start making more ammunition in earnest. If they started right now, it would take them 2 months to get up to speed to supply these troops. Now, this was the primary objective. One of the main strategic objectives early on was to combine Crimea and the Donbass region, because once he does that, he can move forward from Donbass really easily. This line hasn't moved. One of the reasons it hasn't moved was, we believe, the original plan was for them to get all their supplies from Crimea here, which has been a staging area and has easy access via the water to anything they need. So they can supply Kiev, supply Crimea. Crimea supplies the rest of the southern and eastern war effort. But the problem is he hasn't connected the two. He's been trying to connect the two since the first hours of this and didn't get anywhere. Until he connects the two, it looks like he has no real interest in moving forward. The reason this line hasn't moved since then, and we anticipated it moving very quickly, is he hasn't been able to supply it. Now, he could supply it from behind. All that's Russia, and he does have supply areas there. But it looks like primarily all the staging went to Crimea. So if they start moving, they're already taking significant losses, much more than they thought they would, and the Donbass area isn't ready to go. Not until that line is made. We think he's going to make that line reasonably soon, probably within a day. It'll be a thin connection. He's just trying to get a thin connection, but if he can get a thin connection and supply them, well, then he's completed one of his first objectives for the invasion will have been completed. So that's what we're looking at. It is, I think, a worst case scenario. The loss of life has not been catastrophic yet in terms of numbers. They will be, and they will be very soon. You cannot shell a modern city without that. So, and his shelling he's been attempting to avoid making it look like he's hitting civilians. The intelligence coming out of the U.S. intelligence services about what he's saying and thinking is that he's basically reaching the conclusion it's going to be gloves off. Like I said, he already detonated the hyperbaric bomb. Let's actually take a look at what that looks like. This is a recording. It still is not yet verified, although the location has been verified. We showed that earlier, and I think that's in the Discord. This is real footage that happened in Russia. It doesn't appear to have been modified. The location's real. The question is the detonation real? And at this point, according to multiple sources, it is. This is the bomb. We talked about it. It's one of the most horrific conventional weapons we have. This is a detonation that we believe happened, I think it was yesterday, if I recall.
Ох, ёб твою мать, нахуй! Давай. Ебал я его!
To reiterate, that is not a nuclear explosion. It looks at, we discussed why you get a mushroom cloud with certain kinds of explosions, has not indicative of a nuclear explosion. It's just a very hot explosion. The hotter the explosion, the more likely you are to get a mushroom cloud. It's the heat. It's not radioactive material. So that was, we believe, a hyperbaric bomb. Those are designed to suck all the oxygen out of an area. It literally will pull the air out of your lungs. It kills everybody and everything in the area, even before it detonates. There's sort of the initial detonation, the spreading of fuel, and then that catches on fire. And it's, I shouldn't say before it detonates. As part of the detonation, it sucks all the air out. But before you're actually hit with the blast wave is what I should say. It detonates, all the air is sucked out. Boom, blast wave hits and finishes off anything else. it's a gruesome weapon. You can hide from the blast itself behind something that's reinforced and maybe survive that. You can't survive all the oxygen being sucked out unless you are in a hermetically sealed environment. You're going to get killed. And it's really an anti-personnel weapon. I don't know whether he's going to deploy any of these in a city or anything. The assumption is no. My hope is no. If one of those goes off in a city, we are going to see a loss of life that has not been seen since the deployment of a nuclear weapon, the nuclear weapons in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And he appears to be considering doing it. So we'll see. We don't know. We don't know. That's it. We've now hit the wall of what we know. So my hope is that this has been informative, why the economic sanctions are working again. The Russian people at this point are very much victims too. We believe very soon there's going to be pretty significant rioting. There's going to be starvation, I think, in Russia very soon if they don't find a way to ease their sanctions. I don't know how to think about this. I study ethics. I have no idea what to think about this because if they don't get rid of Putin, nobody will. They're innocent, but they're victims now at this point, and if we don't do the sanctions, he's going to keep going and the whole world is going to suffer. So you have a lot of Russians now who are facing a catastrophic economic situation. I think if we had the ability to reverse it, we couldn't until Putin's out of there. So this is the suffering in this area is on the border of being one of the worst humanitarian crises in human history. And the hope is that this can be stopped before it escalates to that. Right now, Putin's instinct as things get worse is to double down, double down, double down. We're going to keep an eye on things tonight and see if he continues with that pattern. If he does, it's going to be a very long night for Kiev and Kharkiv. If not, we're going to wake up the same way that In Time has been blessed to wake up for the last few nights, which is not having to stream until another 24 hours. Our hope is we'll carry it live if we're able to. Our hope is you guys ain't going to see us again until tomorrow. So let me hit the live chat. It's been a while. There's a lot of messages in there. And thank you all for being patient as I run through that. It's a tremendous amount of information. I think it's worth knowing so that we can try to comprehend the amount of human suffering that we are starting to witness and likely to witness. There's very little anyone can do. You can sit there and go on social media and talk about supporting Ukraine, and I think that's a good idea. That's better than nothing. It's the more people that see it, the more people who become aware. Hopefully, the faster this. All you can do is push on the Overton window, and do one other thing, which is remember, if you are an American listening to this, you were born in the richest country in human history, at a time that has actually had the least amount of war of any time in human history. They called them the Dark Ages for a reason. Be thankful you're not there. I've been to Renaissance festivals. They're a lot of fun, but I've seen people really sit there and say, oh, it would be so much better if... No, it wouldn't. No, it wouldn't. Class warfare back then meant something very different. We're all very lucky. So my hope is that we can put our problems down. And there's been some other, and I had originally in this rundown put in a whole bunch of stuff. There was a shooting in Las Vegas. There was today, it looks like they've shot down the ability, Biden's attempt to make the pill universally available for women. There's been a whole bunch of, it's the morning after pill, I should say. There's been a worthwhile news. It's hard to cover them in these rundowns. These rundowns have to, I think, be primarily about this. So we'll see when we're going to start covering more local news a bit more. I'm hesitant to try to integrate the two. This is a different beast. So we're going to keep an eye on it. We're going to be making some decisions. Come join us in the Discord. You can be a part of those decisions. We rely heavily on the communities around us to discuss how we're going to keep our shows going, how we're producing them, what the strategy is going to be, what the content's going to be. So come in, watch, learn, participate if you feel thus inclined, and or just, give one of us, an earful. Titan is, if you like the content here, my name is Nick Soutter, and I'm solely responsible for it. If you don't, our chief producer is named Titan Uranus. He is probably in the live chat. I suspect he is. He usually is. And please don't hesitate to let him know what your chief complaints are. Oh, that's a dangerous joke because that man knows where the skeletons are buried. And what's scary about him is the way he releases them. That they don't just go out in the open. You'll find out years later that you've been screwed. All right, all that notwithstanding, let's get into the live chat. Thank you guys so much, Jake 4D. Big supporter has always been here. Michael, thank you. Secular Rarity, Aunt Kathy, a lot of people. Sinister Porpoise, always here. Mowdy is good. I will tell you this. I was leaning towards doing the show tonight. I felt like I wanted to just have one voice of in time as we talk about this, and so I wanted to come out and say, look, we are looking at a catastrophic humanitarian crisis both in Russia and the Ukraine now, and because the world economy was already suffering because of COVID, because of any number of things, we're going to be able to help, but it's limited for us as well, and the world's already in kind of a bad place. So, this is what you do is you sit there, you take a look at it, and then you say, we're going to go out and we're going to do the best we can. But it's not easy, and it's not fun to look at. So, all right, let's see what else. Lots of people backslapping in the live. Yeah, you all know each other. You're friends, okay. I really probably shouldn't be mocking our live chat. This is why it's a good idea to have Mowdy. So Mowdy's just like, this is the smartest live chat ever. Me, I'm like, oh, you guys are a bunch of clowns. It's not quite that bad. I don't think you're a bunch of clowns. If I did, I wouldn't be doing this show. All right. Let's see. I should have the watch. Somebody asked if I still have the watch. So another story. I'm feeling in the mood of a story. That case is over 200 years old. The glass in it is over 200 years old. It's basically from colonial days. In the U.S., 200 years old is ancient. And I keep in it all sorts of things that have meaning in my life for some reason or another. That's basically all it holds. And it was given to me by the man who married us. He was a Baptist minister, American Baptist minister, who was gay, living with his partner in New York. And he ended up getting cancer, which was common in his family, and he died. And his partner was insistent that all of his things went to different people so that he could be remembered. And so he basically cleared out the apartment, and I think he felt he needed to start fresh, so that they cleared everything out. They had agreed they would do this, and everybody was talking about who gets the clothing or who gets this or that and all these things, and I never heard anyone mention that, and I didn't want to talk about it because it's not my place to say who gets what. But I remember finally I noted that was the only thing left in their house. And I said, what are you guys doing with that? What's going to happen to that? He goes, oh, that was the only thing that beforehand had already been decided who it was going to. I said it was only going to go to one person, and he was going to get it whether he wanted it or not. And I was just like, oh, my God, who? I said, that would be you. That was special. So since I'm not on the remote mic, I'll go quiet for a sec while I see if I still have... that watch should be there, but multiple moves. I've got the watch. It's a question of whether it's there. Oh dear Lord. Well, I have the I don't see it. I'm not gonna make a huge effort to look for it. I found the blunderbuss that almost got me stripped and cavity searched in Heathrow Airport. That probably is not as delightful as it sounds. I'm glad I don't know. Note to travelers, Heathrow Airport does not have a good sense of humor about a blunderbuss. You're sitting there going, it's a flintlock. What am I going to really do? But yeah, they're actually pretty serious about security over there. All right, let's see. So we've got a few other, okay, so, just going through the live chat. And then, please pass the sunflower seeds. Amen. Porpoise, amen. Bregwin, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Russians really like Pepsi for that's why I think Pepsi just seemed to do better, and apparently I'm getting DMs. So let me check my DMs. Yep, it's pronounced Wagner. Oh, Wagner's in the composer. Yeah, I saw that and didn't get to. And then I've got to check some super chats. Like I said, I apologize. I wanted to get that out there. And the same reminder I've done, you know what, this isn't easy for anyone here. All of us are seeing some pretty horrific stuff, and we're looking at a bleak prospect for other people. I think anyone who's got empathy is going to be suffering. So, you know, everybody disconnect if you need to, and take the time off you need, either from watching our show or from doing what I've been trying to find time to play video games with my kids, and found that that's actually very hard to do, because for me, trying to get this show out there so people are as informed as possible is kind of the only way I can sort of sit there and try to make sense of things and say that at least something good is happening. Yeah, I think people are going to try to take him out, and I think it's going to happen reasonably soon. No cake for no. I've been a bad boy. That's if anyone who knows me, it's like, okay, what else is new? We call that Tuesday. All right. Titan has always been a human by any reasonable definition. I know an expert in definitions. I'm not going to ask him, but I'm still going to err on the side of that's highly unlikely. That's a suspect phrase right there, I just got to say. Could Russia be selling Belarus a nuke for their cooperation, considering they amended their constitution to allow nuclear weapons within their borders? That's a good question, Jake. Sell is interesting. In the narrowest sense, no. They're not going to, I think, sell them to them. I don't think they want them to have them. Anything they put over there is going to be under Russian control. In the broadest sense, yes. By that I mean sell. Yeah, they're going to get the prestige, and they're going to have a better say in Russia, which is what I think they want. Belarus has, I think, made a grave miscalculation here, but now they're doubling down. Presumably they're going to be involved in any future attacks. They've said they're going to. We thought they were going to yesterday and didn't, so it may be, again, Putin's pulling the rubber band back, or maybe he's disengaging. I don't know. I'm not optimistic about the second one, but hey, I've been wrong before, and wouldn't it be nice to be wrong about that? So, but they're going to get a military base, and they're going to get a military base that's going to be nuclear armed. Nobody's going to fuck with Belarus after that. And that lets them be some of the big swinging dicks, and that's what they're looking for, and that's what they were sold. That's what they're getting out of this, and so yeah, in that sense, it was sold to them. They're getting something, but it's not. They won't have control of the weapons. There's no way Putin is going to give them control of the weapons. Putin probably knows he's going down, so he's making a show in a blaze of glory, at least in his mind, anyway. Maybe. I don't think that's true. I don't think in his mind he's capable of being defeated. So what he needs time to come up with a solution that's going to work. I don't think he sees himself as actually ultimately able to be defeated. We're all the heroes of our own stories. And it's been my experience that in most good movies, the hero wins in the end. Not all, but in most. So he's the hero of his story. He just hasn't figured out how to get to the ending that is the one that he deserves. And that's him being czar for, at least until the 2030s. And he's confident that he's earned it. He just hasn't figured out how and why he's in this box that just suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Please like and subscribe, and if you listen, if you feel our content is worth it, the like and subscribe really helps. And I just realized, I did take down the thing, so I can't even see the super chat, so I'm going to probably need just 1 minute to get that back up. Let me get into that. Sorry. Thank you for the reminder. Let me look at that right now, because I've had that part of the thing down here, so Jesus. There's always something going on around here. Excuse that. Got a lot of windows open, just trying to keep everything, we got the live map. We've got AP, Reuters, CNN, because I guess I like being misled. Trying to get an idea of what people are saying here. There we go. So I will take a look at. Yep, $10 native atheist was $1 million rubles. There's a reason I like that guy. Yeah, somebody said I was savage. Yeah, that's here's $1 million rubles. That's about right. Thank you. I greatly prefer the $10. So thank you very much for your continued support, Native Atheists. You've been around for a while. A lot of people have, and it's a compliment. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Yeah, there was a bunch of MREs given to, I think, Russian soldiers that were expired. My understanding for MREs in general, the expire date is more of a use by, and they're usually pretty good. Yeah, I think he's going to try to shell the city, and I think it's going to get bad. And I pray to God he's not going to deploy one of those weapons in the city. If he does, it is over for him in every meaningful sense. Keep in mind, if he were to do something like that, well, the U.S. could assassinate him and would be come out clean as a whistle. There's no, we would not be convicted of anything anywhere by anybody. I think he knows that. Again, what I think you need to understand about his mindset, to the best of my ability to understand, is he doesn't believe in a scenario that doesn't have a solution. You just have to figure it out. But it might be killing someone with your bare hands. It might be bribing somebody. It might be just threatening people. Whatever it is, there's a solution. It's probably going to be militarily. It's probably going to be something cruel and brutal. But in his mind, there has to be a solution. He hasn't figured out what it is, so he's just going to stick with what he knows best, which is just, applying as much pressure as he possibly can until something cracks. The problem is it doesn't look like he has the ability to listen. If he really had an army that was much better than his turned out to be, and if the Ukrainians weren't ready, this would have worked. This could have worked. This wasn't always, if he had done this in a day as and how do I know that? Because it worked with Crimea. He took Crimea. So this could have worked. It didn't, and now he's in extraordinary difficulty. So, he's trying to figure out in his mind there has to be another solution that comes out with him on top. He just hasn't figured it out yet. And for him to have gotten where he is, considering where he started, that level of tenacity has served him well. At this point, I think he's lost. I don't think there's any way out for him. Once he realizes it, I don't think he's a blaze of glory kind of guy. He's not going to let someone just stab him, but he's not a let's watch the whole thing burn kind of guy. I don't think that's ever really been his thing. Yeah, China, there's a new story that I'd like to get into that seems to suggest that China actually had a decent idea he was going to do this ahead of time, but they thought it was going to be done very differently, and that he's basically lied to and manipulated them. The fact that the Bank of the Bank of China in Singapore is willing to now start to come in line with the general principle, at least, of the sanctions suggests to me that China is preparing to completely join with the sanctions. So if that happens, it's hard to overestimate. By the way, I wanted to show this footage. We've been talking about what's happening in Kharkiv. This is a rocket that landed in an apartment complex in Kharkiv and failed to detonate. I don't know how you actually take a photo of that. That strikes me as a scary thing to do. I'm going to turn the volume off on that. That hurt. It appears to have destroyed the sprinkler system and triggered the water. That is an undetonated Russian rocket in the middle of somebody's apartment. It does appear like they are targeting, in fact, civilians. And, wow. All right. So let's see. I think. Well, thank you, Secularity. I sincerely appreciate that. And it is. Everybody deserves to hear that, but I certainly appreciate it too. It's not. This isn't fun. It's good to feel like you're doing something productive, but the world would be better off if I didn't have that opportunity. I'll be honest with you. My pet rock is a presuppositionalist. He's very stubborn. Oh, I do like this is the nerd live chat. This is totally nerd live chat. The number of people who are going to get the jokes, especially the solipsist jokes. I find it interesting when we have guests who Commander Macmillan has forgotten more about military anything in the military than I will ever know by such a stretch of the imagination. It's always a delight when we have him on here, but there's always a little bit of, okay, here's the guy who just knows his shit and can bury all of us and all of this stuff, but somebody tells us the solipsist joke, and I was just like, yeah, I got the joke, Macmillan didn't. I don't ever say that because I think he can kill me with his thoughts, but all right, like the Kobayashi Maru. That actually, I think I was thinking about that earlier, so I don't know what that comment was too. But yeah, there's a whole. Yeah, oh yes. The Kirk. I don't believe in the no-win scenario, and I think that's Putin. I think he doesn't believe in the no-win scenario. He thinks there's a way out of everything. You just got to figure it out. No, I think he is at best 12 moves away from chess, and at worst for him, 3 moves away from mate. He's going to get mated at this point. I think it's over. It's just a question of how many moves, and he's delaying it as much as possible because I think he's expecting a miracle. It's the Bernie Madoff syndrome. He really thinks that a free rocket. Dear Lord, yeah. It's the Bernie Madoff syndrome. Madoff just kept sitting there saying, I can't be the bad guy. I didn't set out to, he probably set out to swindle a few small people and ended up, he had to rob Jack to pay Jill. And he ended up before he was done, it's a minor, they're little felonies. Commit just a couple little felonies, and but before you know it, he's got this whole thing because it's the only way to stay out of trouble, and he figures at some point a miracle's going to come. It's wish thinking, it's denial, it's any number of things, and I think Putin is in the middle of all of it, and he's not the person you want to have in the middle of that. I do have that watch, and in fact, I saw it not that long ago. I'd like to snag it. I don't know. I seem to have lost some fascination with it. I also have rubles. That's what almost got me murdered, was trying to accidentally leave the country with rubles and then failing to bribe the customs official to do it. It never crossed my mind to try to bribe a customs official, but apparently if you don't do that in Russia, they may shoot you for it. But they jumped out and said, no, he's a dumb American and doesn't realize. It's like, oh, sorry. Putin just needs a hug. Does a smack across the head with a 2x4 count as a hug? If it does, I'm on board. If not, I mean, he's a big Medvedi, right? Is the Russian bear kind? I mean, if it's a like a black bear giving him a hug, I'd pay money to see that. Macmillan mentioned something about Germany yesterday, and I think we went over this quickly, but he had said something, and I think it got mistaken in terms of what he was trying to say versus what people heard, and what people heard was also true. But he was talking about Hitler at the end, and at the end, it's not just that Hitler killed himself. That's sort of what we ended up talking about, but Hitler, yeah, repeated hugs with a 2x4. I am totally on board with that. Hitler, somebody's going to clip that. It's always weird I say something. Sometimes I know it's like drinking that bottle of which I think Bounty's not here anymore, so I can because I don't think he ever saw the clip of me just downing the Mountain Dew straight from a 2-liter bottle. But hey, who's got time to if I could take caffeine like intravenously, I'd be freebasing the caffeine. Hitler, in the end, sort of decided that, okay, quick lesson on Hitler, and then I think we're going to start to wrap this up. If anybody thinks that they really understand how evil Hitler is, let me suggest you're probably wrong. He was probably worse. First of all, the gas chambers that he was building at Auschwitz, and he was expanding Auschwitz. Auschwitz alone had enough of a capacity to wipe out all the Jews in Europe. Certainly in Germany, probably in all of Europe. And what was he doing? He was expanding it. And it would have been easier to make it a temporary facility, make it all out of tents and stuff like that. You can get the same job done, only faster in terms of constructing it. But he was making it out of brick and mortar, and it was designed to last. It was designed to last 50 years easily. So the question is, what was he going to do next? Because there weren't that many Jews in Europe. When you add that to the fact that when he realized he was going to lose, he decided that he had been betrayed by all of Germany, and he wanted to watch Germany suffer for it. This was his country, and it wasn't just about committing suicide or killing himself. He wanted to watch his own countrymen burn and die for having failed, and just leave the whole country to be obliterated. And unfortunately, I genuinely do not believe Putin is that kind of guy. I don't believe that. I think the evidence against that is strong enough that I'm confident that he's not that kind of guy. He will not go without a fight, and he will fight to his last breath. Period. End of discussion. But that's not a. I think another reason actually is because I think it would be a capitulation of failure to decide he's going to take the rest of the world with him. No, he's not even going to give them the satisfaction of being that kind of tyrant. He wants to. No, he's going to fight to his last breath, and he'll never admit that he lost. And blowing up the world is the pansy's way out, I think, to him. So, and thank God for small favors. Oh, thank God for small favors. But that's my my view. All right, Mowdy. Thank you so much. I look forward to catching up with you on the Discord. Thank you for coming by. And we're gonna start to wrap that up. Yeah, Hitler did do one good thing, which is he was the only person who had ever succeeded in killing Adolf Hitler. So he's got that going for him. Yeah. So, anyways, it was clear to me that Hitler was intending on killing a lot more people than just the Jews. The question is who was going to be next? Well, probably Russians, probably anyone of any Slavic descent. He was going to go after a huge number of people. But it seems to me, I think there's a very good argument to be made that he didn't really care who it was going to be. He just seemed to, there was something about the process that fascinated him, and something about the process of purifying the human race, but I don't think he even really cared how it was being done. By his own metrics, he probably should have been in the gas chamber sooner than most people. That didn't really bother him, and I don't think it was a lack of conscience. I think it was a lack of an actual unifying code in what he was doing. It appears like there was one, but that's just because he didn't get to the end of the first wave of people he was going to hit. I don't think he'd ever have stopped, and I think at the end he'd have been perfectly content to be one of the last 3 people alive, trying to figure out how he's going to get the other 2 into the gas chamber. Imagine the Joker as Chancellor of Germany. I don't think that's a closer comparison. So for those of you who want to be comforted a bit with who was Adolf Hitler, that's my view. I think he was worse than he gets credit for. But at any rate, so I think. Wait, I've been stocking up on those bottle caps for nothing. Well, you know, hold out hope, porpoise. I've got my own. All right. Yeah, I can do that. Thank you. And good to see you, Matty. I appreciate you coming by. I have very little idea what you're talking about, but I'll figure it out. Talking to the wrong guy. All right. So, yeah, the Slavs were next in line. And there was that line was not ever going to end. So, and Putin wants, I don't think even Putin wants to really, I mean, I think Putin would, there is something that would satisfy Putin. I don't think he wants to control the world. I don't think he'd say no to it. But I don't think he wants to control the world. I think he really just wants to be the next Stalin. And again, to us, that sounds terrible. They worship the guy. Again, Stalingrad, you know, Lenin, they still have a tomb of Lenin. He is so important. They've got the tomb of Lenin. You can go in, you can see him. His body is you know, embalmed, and he's just hanging out. And they had a city, it was called Leningrad. I still think of it as Leningrad because that's what it was called when I was there. And they renamed it Stalingrad, and this wasn't objectionable to. I was in, when I was there, I like to talk philosophy. Back then, I liked to talk philosophy. I like to talk about all these things, and some of the Russians who were listening were like, "Wow, this is really amazing. You remind us of one of our great leaders." And I was like, "Oh, who's that?" Like Stalin. I was just like, "Did you just say that I remind you of Stalin?" And they were just beaming ear to ear as if they'd given me the greatest compliment in the world, and they're calling me Stalin. It's a different world over there, and they see things very differently. Note to self: if a Russian calls you Stalin, it's actually probably intended as a compliment. At any rate, all of that notwithstanding, yeah. All right. Thank you all for listening. We probably went off the rails a bit tonight, but I'm hoping that all of it was useful at a minimum, the first half of the show was, I think, a very good rundown. We're going to be on standby all night. We've basically been on standby for a while. We're not running our regularly scheduled shows. It takes a long time to book a show, to get guests, to prep for it. And right now, everything is staying on top of the news and being as accurate as possible. There's been a lot of people who've been supporting us and a lot of people who've been amplifying us. Sunday is, I think, one of the most recent and probably biggest example. And we really appreciate President Sunday doing that. And we appreciate other people who've been doing that. You know, if you like the content, share it. You know, hopefully that means what we're saying is going out to other people, and hopefully that means what good it is will be amplified as well. And B, it's a great way to help us out. Like and subscribe. I hate saying that because I always feel like I'm the whore. Like, you think this is good? Did you like the show tonight? Are you feeling satisfied? Then like and subscribe. You know, it's just like, no, that's not. Although for somebody, you know, I may have done that eerily. Like everyone on there I know is saying, okay, that was creepy. But I have to believe somebody out there is saying, okay, no, what was scary about that was that was actually almost good. That's what I feel like. I hate asking for this likes and subscribes, but it is, you know, it's no perfect job. And one of the downsides of this one is shilling. So, you know, please do your best to support us. If you like the content, if you don't. We don't. You know, we do what we do because we think we're helping, and that's what everybody around here does. So thank you all very much for your stop. You see, I told you there's going to be people who are going to be truly creeped out by that, but oh dear Lord, sorry to all those of you sorry. All right. There were rails. Yeah, well, there were rails. I never quite saw them, but they were there. At least I've been told. We planned them. We put some rails down before the show, and then I was just like, north that way. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you again for everyone's support. Thank you, Native Atheist, for your super chat once again. And look forward to catching you all. With any luck, we won't be talking to each other again for another 24 hours. We're going to be doing a show, I think, until this is over. We're going to be doing a show every night, 9 p.m. We are looking into getting into some regular news at some point because there is other news and it is important and we are missing it. But it's very hard to do both. And so we're working on it. Join us in the live chat. We'll have that discussion and a whole bunch more. Thank you to the mods. Thank you to everyone else. Good night. Maybe.